All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today we're going to be looking at my projections for the College Game Day crew for the 2022 season. And of course, this is just the spring, and a lot will change as the weeks go on by. I think the first 4 or 5 weeks are pretty self-explanatory. Anything after that, though, it could change significantly with who's good, who's bad. I think we got some really interesting matchups this year, and so far these are my spring predictions on where the Game Day crew will go. Week 1, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Again, one of those that's pretty self-explanatory. I know there's some really great options to kick off the season, though, and none of them make more sense than heading to Columbus. Notre Dame is getting back a lot in the trenches. Guys like Jarrett Patterson up front, and Blake Fisher, I think at left tackle, is going to be a big star to watch. They really got things going in the second half of the year in the trenches. They were able to run the ball much better. Pass protection was better. Ohio State, though, they were incredibly soft a season ago in that area. The passing attack, though, the Buckeyes bring to the table is insane with C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith, Nick Jigba, all these talented pass catchers. I think they figured to have a pretty big edge against the secondary. It's now without Kyle Hamilton. They do get in Brandon Joseph from Northwestern, but they're not really the most athletic secondary in the nation, so this could be a big disadvantage for them. There's Heisman contenders all over this offense for Ryan Day. Isaiah Foskey, though, and a veteran front seven along with tight end Michael Mayer. These guys have some favorable matchups in their own right. It should be a great game with playoff implications. Looking at it here, a few months out, I think this will probably be a closer game than people think. Some other options, though, they include Georgia and Oregon. Dan Lanning leaves Georgia to become the Oregon head coach. His first game will come against his former team. That happens in Atlanta. Utah versus Florida. A very interesting game. I've been saying for years, why do we not see Pac-12 versus SEC in the regular season or in bowl season? You never see it anywhere. So this should be a very rare contest to see as the Utes go to Gainesville. Cincinnati versus Arkansas, it's almost destined to be a top 25 ranked matchup to kick off the year. I think you'd also get some looks to go down to Fayetteville. Week 2, another pretty obvious choice, Alabama versus Texas. The Tide and Horns kick off a home-and-home series. Nick Saban sees his former assistant, Steve Sarkisian, 2 years removed from a national championship together where Stark won the Frank Boyles Award for nation's top assistant. Texas did go 5-7 last season with a drastic second half to the season, but will once again have plenty of hype as they host the Natty favorite here in Week 2. Former top-ranked recruit in Quinn Ewers gets his first chance to shine, though, as he matches up with the defending Heisman winner Bryce Young, a slew of other veterans as well that are back with a big chip on their shoulder. Bijan Robinson might also be the nation's top running back. This game is going to feature a lot of guys who are playing on Sundays, so this is going to feature a lot of talent, some early playoff implications as well. Other options, I think Tennessee, traveling to Pitt, Baylor versus BYU. Those are some other games that could potentially get the look, but Alabama, Texas seems to be penciled in for the second week of the season. Week 3, Georgia versus South Carolina. The Bulldogs, they reload in 2022, coming off that national championship victory. They're going to get back, they're going to get a big-time early season test. They visit Columbia to play South Carolina. Shane Beamer did wonders this past season to get back a good bunch of talent on defense. Cam Smith is one of the nation's top returning corners, while Jordan Birch and Zach Pickens are former 5-stars, really looking to make a splash here on the defensive line. They also got Jordan Strawn as well. He led the nation in sacks 2 years ago at Georgia State, so they got some power up front. The biggest reason why the Gamecocks will be contenders this season, though, flat out simple. Spencer Rattler, granted he was benched at Oklahoma, which led to his transfer here. He's reunited with his former coach, though. He's still one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country. This is a player that is a great equalizer for a team that's not going to stack up greatly with Georgia in terms of talent. Playing at home early in the season, say what you want about Rattler, he still had a really impressive freshman season. He was not awful last year, like people said. I think he completed 73% of his passes. This is going to be an interesting game. Rattler, big chance to shine early. South Carolina, a great opportunity earlier in the season. Other options, Miami, Texas A&M, Penn State, Auburn, some interesting non-conference games that weekend as well. Week 4, Wisconsin and Ohio State, the fourth week of the season doesn't present an overwhelming amount of options. You got Arkansas and Texas A&M and Arlington and Clemson and Wake Forest. But, as we look at the schedule here in the spring, that's about it. This seems like the most likely destination for the Game Day crew. Of course, the Buckeyes have that all-important Week 1 clash in Columbus that the Game Day crew will be at to kick off the season when they play Notre Dame. But I'm going to assume they'll be back a few weeks later. The Badgers had one of the greatest run defenses of all time last season. I think it was 68 yards per game they gave up. Nobody could do anything against them running the ball, not even Army, who does it very well. They slow down everybody. They also have a quite exciting backfield, though, led by Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi. Previously noted, last year's Ohio State defense was poor versus the run. Obviously, things I think will start to look to change now that Jim Knowles has come over, but it's not going to be immediate. If we see this same defense we saw last year, Wisconsin has a great shot of ending an 8-game losing skid to the Shoes. They haven't won in Columbus since 2004. I think this figures to be a really great matchup for them. Same old every time they play the Buckeyes. Great defense. They hold their own. Offense can't do anything because they're too one-dimensional with this scheme. Same old every year. This year, I think it could be different, though, because it's Ohio State defense, obviously. We'll see what happens with them. But this is a great opportunity for the Badgers to really take a stand and finally beat the Buckeyes, and that would do a lot for their playoff hopes. So it should be interesting to see what happens as we dive deep into that game. Late September, obviously, long way to go. Week 5, NC State versus Clemson. This game might just decide the ACC Coastal. The Tigers look to get back on top. They're going to have to avenge last year's loss, though, to the Wolfpack in the process. NC State, they get a lot of back on both sides. The ultra-efficient Devin Leary at quarterback. You got Devin Carter at receiver. They obviously lose some running backs. They also lose Ike Mukwanu. This is still an offense, so they got some pretty good talent. This game, though, I think the two defenses will be the headliner. They should both rank among the nation's best. Well, this will be a good measuring stick, though, to see how much the Tigers' offense has progressed. As we get deeper into this offseason, we'll talk about those defenses in a different episode, but just know that these are going to be two very strong units. Clemson, you already know a lot about. NC State, I think, as a unit, they'll certainly surprise some people. Some other options, though: Oklahoma State and Baylor, Michigan, Iowa, Kentucky versus Ole Miss. Solid, respectable conference matchups, but I think this ACC Coastal clash will be the headliner in Week 5. Week 6, Texas A&M versus Alabama. In 2021, Jimbo Fisher became the first former assistant of Nick Saban to knock off the future Hall of Famer. Unfortunately, the Aggies' playoff hopes were already out the window. They lost 2 games in a row before that. And then, they, as an unranked, hosted the number 1 ranked Tide, and they knocked them off. Aggies, though, they look to be undefeated this time around. This will be the crown jewel matchup of the SEC West. This game will make or break A&M's national title aspirations. Very talented ball club. Their future is looking bright. But this year, against a veteran Alabama team, this is going to be a tough matchup for them to win, but they will certainly be at the forefront of the national title picture. Other options: Ohio State versus Michigan State. It's really the only other one that really caught my eye at the first glance. 2 big-time matchups, though, in their respective divisions across college football. Week 7, USC versus Utah. The Utes are the favorite to repeat in the Pac-12 as they get back some impressive ball players on both sides of the ball. Mid-season clash with this upstart USC squad will likely be the biggest hurdle they face all season long. Trojans made a big splash in the offseason, running Lincoln Riley, which led to the arrival of Caleb Williams and other talented ball players in the portal and through recruiting. Salt Lake City, always been a home to one of the rowdiest crowds in FBS. They're long overdue for another showcase on game day, and I think we'll get it here in the most anticipated matchup in the Pac-12 all season long. Bama goes on the road to play Tennessee. Arkansas travels to BYU, a very underrated game. Non-conference, that is, for the Hogs. That's going to be a very interesting one. Week 7, this should be a good week in college football. Week 8, Ole Miss versus LSU gets the nod, but if South Carolina beats Georgia early on in the year, this will likely be, put them in position to host game day a few weeks later here as they host Texas A&M. That's really the only other option. They have plenty of opportunities. I think an SEC West showdown, though, is certainly at first glance the way to go. Ole Miss loses DJ Durkin and plenty of playmakers on defense. This offense will stay among the nation's best, though. Jackson Dart brings an abundance of arm talent from USC. Slicing and dicing runner Zach Evans from TCU replaces 3 highly productive running backs for the Rebels. Matt Corral was a 4th one, really, if you want to count him as well. 4 highly productive runners now gone. Zach Evans has to replace all that. So a lot of talent coming in. It'll be interesting to see what those guys can do to replace it, because they're going to have to kind of carry this year. I think the defense will take a step back, though. The early season stretch for both teams, quite manageable. This contest kicks off a daunting final few weeks for the Rebels and the Tigers. If you have a chance to pull up their 2 schedules, just look at them. The back half is completely stacked. Texas A&M, South Carolina, again, is one of the only other options. Week 8, kind of dry compared to some of the other weeks in CF. Week 9, Michigan State versus Michigan. This ended up being a monumental clash, in the Big Ten East. Last season with the Spartans winning a thriller. This year, the rivalry returns to Ann Arbor. Mel Tucker is building something special in East Lansing. Gets back a quite impressive roster on both sides, too. Feature plenty of talented transfers, looking to have the same impact to that of Kenneth Walker last year. They get Jared Broussard, a former Pac-12 Player of the Year. Jalen Berger from Wisconsin. So they got some beef in the backfield. Wolverines, on the other hand, they lose a bunch of top-notch ball players in their own right, both coordinators. But J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, these guys are the future on offense. You throw guys like Ronnie Bell and Blake Corman in the mix. This should certainly turn in a season worth of them hosting game day. I think this will be a very good year for both of these programs, and I would love to see the game day crew return to Ann Arbor. Other options, though, Ohio State plays Penn State, and then the great Florida-Georgia game. Week 10, Tennessee. They travel to take on Georgia. Josh Heupel was highly impressive in his first season with the Vols. His team was pretty competitive on the offensive side of the ball. Defense as well. A lot of games they were pretty... they're in most of them, This is a high-ceiling team, though, as we inch closer to 2022. Hendon Hooker, he's back after a pleasantly surprising 2021. Cedric Tillman last year exploded for 200-plus on the Bulldogs in last year's meeting. Georgia reloads its roster. They should be well within the top 10 all season long, but many expect Tennessee to throw its hat in the ring for the East. This will likely be an important game late in the season. It being in Week 10 is very exciting. I like to see games like this in the SEC East happen late in the year. Other options, though, Baylor and Oklahoma, Clemson, Notre Dame. Some very interesting games there that could really decide two specific conferences, really, and then the non-conference with Notre Dame, who might be battling for a playoff opportunity. Week 11, Alabama versus Ole Miss. Week 11 might be the opportunity to head to an FCS or a Group of 5 school, but if the Rebels are competitive this season, then the crew might just make the way down to Oxford. Ole Miss is always producing a rowdy home crowd, especially for when the Tide visit. They're going to be in the thick of the CFP race. Even if the Rebels are stumbling and aren't ranked at this time, I think they'll still get a primetime spot, even if they end the year with 7 or 8 wins in the regular season. I think Alabama coming on the road, Ole Miss, make this a nighttime game. I don't see why game day would not come there. I can totally see that, even if Ole Miss is not ranked or anything like that. Very interesting Week 11 showcase, though. Week 12, Oklahoma State versus Oklahoma. The Cowboys lose a ton for one of the nation's top-ranked defenses from a season ago, but Derek Mason comes in. He gets some quality pass rushers to work with. Colin Oliver, Brock Martin, for example. The Sooners, though, they're not going to fall off much. Despite some monumental changes this offseason, I expect both of these teams to be in the thick of the race for the Big 12, although there are some games in the Pac-12 that could earn the nod this weekend with USC, UCLA, Utah, Oregon. I think Bedlam, though, is right now, at first glance, the favorite. First one without Lincoln Riley, too. Brent Venables, his first Bedlam showcase, should be an interesting game. And then you move to the final week of the regular season, Week 13, Rivalry Week. I can't really make a prediction here because there's so many great games. Besides the opening weekend, the final set of games, though, to round out the regular season, features the most options, Rivalry Week always showcases a great abundance of matchups, regardless of what's on the line. But there's other features that are most to play for are the ones that have playoff implications on the line. I think Lee Corso and the gang are going to look to go to a game like maybe Auburn and Alabama. That's always a thrilling contest. South Carolina and Clemson this year could potentially feature some massive playoff implications because South Carolina could really make a run here. Clemson, they're expected to bounce back. This is a very interesting game. That rivalry is it's not meant much over the last couple of years. It's been dominated by the Tigers, but this year that could be a very interesting game. Baylor and Texas, they're going to headline two teams gunning for the Big 12. That could potentially be the destination here. Notre Dame and USC, they both have plenty of talent on their rosters. Two of the best first-year coaches in the game at their new school. Oh yeah, Ohio State, they host Michigan in the game as well. Plenty of options here, so it's tough to make a prediction for just one, but Week 13 is always the best week, usually, of the college football season with all the rivalries going down and with everything that's on the line. So that's going to wrap everything up for today's episode, guys. If I missed anything, go ahead and comment below where you want to see game day go to this year. Comment, like, subscribe. See you next time.